I'm a little business boy. I think they can smell your fear. Shh. Go on, contribute. Stop, they're all looking. Tell them something business-ish.
I'd bet good money you've been in this exact spot. Sitting in a meeting, your mind won't shut up, your body gets the hydraulics wrong, you get sweaty hands, but you have dry mouth. Now, consider this. In a room of 10 people, statistically speaking, 6 of them are thinking the same exact thing. 6 people are spiraling that they're frauds. That is imposter syndrome working its magic. It's quite ironic. All things considered, you've probably already achieved quite a lot professionally. If a version of you from 5 years ago could see where you're now, they would probably be impressed. And yet, for some reason, for some inexplicable reason, it still doesn't feel like you're enough. In today's video, we're unpacking what imposter syndrome is and going through 3 strategies that help. Shifting away from performance-based identity, embracing imperfection, and developing an appetite for problems. My name is Jafar. I've spent the last 10 years in corporate watching smart teams make questionable calls. And this is the HR Diary, where episode by episode we cook up better solutions to old problems. You can either watch the video or pop in your earphones and listen along. Imposter syndrome, or the imposter phenomenon in academic research, is the experience of feeling like a professional fraud despite evidence to the contrary. Put simply, it's that persistent feeling of not being enough, not enoughness. People experiencing it live with the fear that others will eventually figure them out, that they're bluffing, that they're winging it, getting by on luck. And the irony is, it often affects high achievers. Which, to a point, makes sense. High achievers more often than not find themselves catapulted into a new challenge. No time to get cozy. They've just started feeling more confident in the last position, and then swoosh, they end up at a new table, confronting new challenges with more difficult people. That discomfort becomes fuel. It pushes you to over-prepare, over-deliver, and in the process, stretch yourself thin. In a strange way, many high performers are just some walking version of anxiety harnessed for productivity. Michael Gervais is a high-performance psychologist who, among other things, worked with Felix Baumgartner. You might remember, a few years back, Baumgartner did a feat no one ever tried before, the stratosphere jump. He said, "I want to be the first human outside of the aircraft to break the sound barrier." Gervais, in his book The First Rule of Mastery, which I recommend to anyone interested, diagnosed our situation in the following way. We live in a performance-obsessed culture. Asphyxiation with how well we perform has seeped into work. The quality of our performance impacts how other people define us, but more significantly, how we define ourselves. When your boss praises your work, it's not just recognition, it's validation of who you think you are. Your ego gets a dopamine hit, you bask in it, and to a point, that's fine. But here's the problem. If you outsource your sense of worth to other people's opinions, you become dependent on those opinions. One vague comment, one undefined glance has power to unlock new dimensions of anxiety. Your self-worth becomes contingent on performance and outcomes, and mistakes, which, let's make it super clear, are inevitable, stop being learning opportunities. They become threats to your identity. The fear of coming short pushes you into perfectionism. You think if you're prepared enough, if your slides are flawless, if you've covered every angle, no one can challenge your well-thought-through approach, and by extension, your worth. Listening to feedback is important. Understanding other people's opinion is part of social intelligence, but when it becomes the prime driver of your thoughts and actions, that's when it becomes unhealthy. The remedy is mindset shift, from performance-based identity to purpose-based identity. Gervais, in his Ask Me Anything session on his podcast, defined it in the following way.
Your purpose does not need to be this grand thing, this unifying singular purpose that's going to change the world, or, like wells in Africa or trees in the rainforest. It does not need to be this grand singular thing that other people would be like, oh, that's amazing. According to research, there's 3 tenets to purpose. The first is that it matters to you. Nobody can give you your purpose. It has to uniquely resonate with you. The second is it needs to be bigger than you. So it's not just about your needs getting met in some way. So So it's bigger than you. It means it involves other people or Mother Nature in some kind of way. And the third is that there's a future orientation.
We love talking about purpose. We love talking about values and meaning until it's actually time to sit down, put in the hours and define them. All of a sudden, it all becomes this almost mystical quest. But it doesn't have to. First, you don't find purpose like a treasure on a pirate map. You build it like a hypothesis. And then, with time, you refine it through experimentation. In my segment Talent Development and Career Growth Explained, I talk about treating your career like a research project, and it's not a coincidence that finding professional purpose and defining your career go hand in glove. I invite you to spend the next week doing an exercise in, let's call it, professional self-anthropology. Get a small notebook. During that week, write down your field notes. Note down the insights, the moments of curiosity, random thoughts and questions that spark your interest. Note the energy shifts when they happen during the day. Identify which tasks give you energy and which drain it. Observe how your mood changes during or after experience. Keep in mind that happiness and concentration are very closely linked. Michael C., author of the book Flow, has proven that each of us are at our personal high level of happiness when we're deeply immersed in a specific activity. Get us involved in a task for which we have a powerful inquisitiveness, and although we might not have predicted it, we'd be happy doing this activity. When the pager sets off and jolts us out of the deep concentration, our happiness ratings soar. Pager. Why did I say pager? Timer. Stopwatch. Paradoxically, writes Michael C., the feeling of happiness is only realized after the event. To acknowledge it at the time would only serve as a distraction. The rock climber would lose his footing, the chess player his game. Don't do it in isolation. Reach out to your colleagues, ask them what they love about their jobs, ask them what they hate about their jobs. You might learn a lot from people who's been in the game way longer. When at the end of the week you review the results of your field notes, underline the good stuff and start asking yourself, how can I have more of this in my work life? This should already give you a direction. To bring more dimensions to your experiment, answer the following questions. How does my work benefit someone else? Who is counting on me even indirectly? How can I use more of my strengths in my tasks? Mark Manson, in I believe it was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F***, wrote, "Beliefs are theories, actions are experiments, and your emotions are feedback." That's it. That's your experiment. You're not searching for some cosmic truth about your purpose. You are running experiments. The field notes are your data. Following curiosity is like mining for raw materials. It doesn't give you finished product, but it gives you supply to build with. Here's how this works for me. Every year comes December, I evaluate my personal values and purpose. I check if they still resonate with me, and they evolve over time. The first time I did it was in 2020, and to be perfectly frank, I ended up with a long and winded statement, which was actually pretty terrible. But over time it has evolved. Right now my professional purpose is simple. Shaping better organizations. Not awesome, not perfect, just better. Marginal gains, 1% improvement compounded over time. With that, when I make a mistake at work, and yes, I do quite often actually, that doesn't shake my identity. I don't like it, but when my manager points out that there are some shortcomings in my project, my headspace stays clear. My identity isn't crumbling. I learn from the feedback, I adjust, and I move on. My professional identity is not based on performance anymore. It's based on that purpose. Important disclaimer, that shift doesn't happen overnight. It takes practice, but once it clicks, it really gets easier. Once you've started to define your purpose and detach your identity from performance, you can stop obsessing about perfection. Because perfectionism, while it can be a motivating ideal to strive for, is in most cases unattainable. Let's listen to what Roger Federer has to say on this topic.
In tennis, perfection is impossible. In the 1,526 singles matches I played in my career, I won almost 80% of those matches. Now, I have a question for you. What percentage of points do you think I won in those matches? Only 54%. In other words, even top-ranked tennis players win barely more than half of the points they play. When you lose every second point on average, you learn not to dwell on every shot. You teach yourself to think, okay, I double faulted, it's only a point. Okay, I came to the net and I got passed again, it's only a point. Even a great shot, an overhead backhand smash that ends up on ESPN's top 10 playlist, that too is just a point. So and here's why I'm telling you this. When you're playing a point, it has to be the most important thing in the world, and it is. But when it's behind you, it's behind you. This mindset is really crucial because it frees you to fully commit to the next point and the next point after that with intensity, clarity, and focus.
It's just a point. It's just a point. Even just purely from a business perspective, over-indexing on perfect results in being too late to the game. Jeff Bezos, in his 2016 letter to shareholders, outlined the tenets of his day one mentality at Amazon. He wrote, "Most decisions should probably be made with somewhere around 70% of the information you wish you had. If you wait for 90%, in most cases, you're probably being slow." Think about what that means for someone paralyzed by imposter syndrome. You're waiting to feel 90% certain before you speak up in a meeting, before you share your idea, before you take on that stretch project. But by the time you feel certain, the moment has passed. Someone else has spoken, or the decision has been made. So instead of perfect, it is about finding the sweet spot between flawed and flawless. Adam Grant's hidden potential. Where is Adam Grant's hidden potential? 1 second. Okay, again. For me personally, Adam Grant's hidden potential was a great unlock about perfectionism. He breaks down 3 mistakes that perfectionists make. 1. They obsess over details that don't matter. They're so busy optimizing tiny problems that they miss the discipline to find the right problems to solve. In other words, they can't see the forest for the trees. They avoid unfamiliar situations and difficult tasks that might lead to failure. They end up refining a narrow set of existing skills instead of developing new ones. And 3, they berate themselves for mistakes, which makes it harder to learn from them. See how perfectionism ties back to performance-based identity? When your worth depends on flawless execution, you can't take risks. You can't embrace, to paraphrase Milan Kundera, the unbearable awkwardness of learning. Grant suggests, a bit tongue-in-cheek, setting a mistake budget. Decide on the minimum number of mistakes you want to do every day, every week, because then when you expect to stumble, you ruminate less. But here's the question I know you're probably asking at this point. Don't I have to be dissatisfied to be driven? And this is such a good question. Our ego will hold on to the perfectionism. You might instinctively think, if I'm not dissatisfied with the results, if I don't continuously push the envelope, I will lose that secret sauce that made me successful in the first place. And yeah, even if that secret sauce is anxious energy. If I'm not obsessing over the details, I will lose that edge that differentiates me from people living by good enough. I wrestled with this question for the longest time. And finally, one idea helped me find a way. James Clear, which you might remember from writing the book. James Clear, that you might remember as the author of the book Atomic Habits, explained this beautifully in one of the episodes of The Diary of a CEO.
For a long time, I had trouble with this question of, do I have to be dissatisfied if I want to be driven?
Yeah.
Do you have to be dissatisfied to be driven? Because to me, I felt like there's where I'm at right now, and there's where I want to be. And so there's this gap, and that gap is dissatisfaction. That gap is, you want it to change, you want it to close. And it's also what is motivating and driving you, is to try to close that gap. And so the healthiest answer, maybe the answer is yes, I don't know. But the healthiest answer that I've come up with is, imagine like an acorn falls from a tree. It manages to take root, becomes a seedling and then a sapling, and eventually grows into this mature oak tree. And at no point in that process, when it was just an acorn, it wasn't criticizing itself for not being a sapling. It was just a sapling, it wasn't criticizing itself for not being an oak. It wasn't dissatisfied with where it was at. And nobody came over and was criticizing it for, oh, I can't believe you're not a full-grown tree yet. But it kept growing the whole time. So simultaneously, you have this thing where it was both perfect at each stage that it was at. Nothing was wrong, and yet it continued to grow. And the reason is because that's just what an oak tree does. That's what it is encoded to do. It is encoded for growth. And so when I look at myself, I think if I put myself in the right position, that's how I feel about it. You know, I am perfectly happy with where I'm at each stage, and yet I'm encoded to grow, right? I'm encoded to keep going. And so I can both be driven and be satisfied. I can both be appreciative of the moment and still moving forward. And I think that works best when you find that thing. Sometimes we call it your strengths. Sometimes we might say it's what you're encoded to do. But when you find that thing that is well aligned for you, and if you do find that, then you can have both of those.
So you can be satisfied with where you are right now and still be growing. And that claim is these things aren't opposites. Okay, we have covered quite a lot of ground. Let me recap quickly where we are right now. We have shifted from performance-based identity to purpose-based identity, and we also stopped chasing perfection and started embracing the 70% rule, the mistake budget, the acorn mindset. Now, here's the final piece, and this is where it all comes together. This is strategy number 3, and it's all about developing appetite for problems. And in this one, I will share a bit of my private perspective. So early in my corporate career, my intuition suggested that solving people problems required a good mixture of empathy and systems thinking. I came across this quote attributed to Deming, the father of modern quality, that we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. And boy, that tickled my nerdy side. Systems thinking became a focal point for me. At certain points in my career, I wanted organizations to run like well-oiled machines or athletic organisms. And the downside to that was that every deviation from healthy performance felt like a glitch, a bug in otherwise clean, beautiful code. Whenever a problem appeared, it would annoy me because it would prove that we had not achieved the corporate utopia. And mind you, I guess at that point I was still quite idealistic and maybe a bit silly. And while this ambition level to a point makes sense, not all problems are bugs. Some are actually signals. I did understand that I was paid for solving problems, but what I missed is that even with the best thought through organization designs, capability building programs, or state-of-the-art employee life cycles, there's no state of bliss. It took me a while to kind of not only understand it, but internalize it on a deeper level. First, I started using the failure framework by Amy Edmondson, and we covered this in one of the previous videos, Right Kind of Wrong. That framework treats failures, but it can also be applied to problems. I categorize the problems to preventable, complex, or intelligent, same way we categorize failures. The preventable ones need to trend to 0. Simple. For complex and intelligent problems, I apply conscious self-talk. I don't have to solve them. I don't see them as a distraction in my otherwise beautiful day. I get to solve them. And that perception shift is super powerful. Another body of research clearly points out that when we view hurdles as threats, we tend to back down and give up. When we treat barriers as challenges to conquer, we rise to the occasion. Now, I told you that it's going to be a bit personal. When I was in kindergarten, my dream job was actually to be a detective. And Batman, I guess, is sort of a detective. In fact, I wouldn't mind changing careers. Anyways, I managed to tap into that energy, and all that complex, intelligent problem solving become a little investigation side for me. Later, I discovered that this approach was already well researched. Psychologists called it harmonious passion, taking joy in a process rather than feeling the pressure to achieve the outcome. That naturally doesn't mean that the outcome doesn't matter, but similarly to the acorn-oak metaphor, it is a natural product of a laser focus on the matter at hand. That's how I personally developed an appetite for problems. Problems becomes kind of snacks, not threats. So, you've made it so far, amazing. Let's bring this all home. Here's what changes. Tomorrow when you walk into that meeting from the beginning of the video and your manager questions your approach, you won't feel your identity cracking. You're there to serve your purpose. And it's just a point. That mistake you made last week? Problem snack. The project that went sideways? Just a point. You're not collecting validation. You're collecting reps. Every rep, good or bad, serves the purpose you defined. And it's just a point. That's the shift. Performance-based identity keeps you hostage to other people's opinions. Purpose-based identity sets you free to learn and do the work. Stay curious. HR out.